Welcome to this fourth technique video in this series on adding beads to crochet. In this video, we will see what happens when you add a loose bead in the middle of working a stitch. I'll demonstrate the technique first. In fact, I'll show it two different ways. I'll show a slower way, but I think it's easier to understand, and then a more efficient way. After that, I'll discuss the pros and cons of doing it this way. So let's get started. I am in double crochet. I have worked my turning chains, so I am at the end of a stitch ready to start the next stitch. I will work a plain double crochet. As I do, I'll point out the options for adding a bead. Double crochet starts with a yarn over, so that's option 1. You could add a bead on the yarn over. Insert the hook, draw up a loop. This loop anchors your new stitch to your fabric, so this anchor loop is option 2. Yarn over and draw through 2 loops. I only have 2 loops left on my hook. My next maneuver will complete my stitch, so this is my last opportunity. This loop is option 3. Yarn over and finish off. If you are in single crochet, you only have one option. Single crochet doesn't have a yarn over. It starts with an anchor, and already you're down to only 2 loops. So single crochet has one option right here. Double crochet has 3. Let's see what that looks like. In this case, my working hook is too large for my bead, so I will need to use a smaller hook for attaching beads. The first option is probably the trickiest one to figure out. How do you put a bead on a yarn over? One way to do it is to bring up your hook with the bead, throw the yarn over on that hook, draw through your bead. That gives you a loop, and then put that loop on your working hook and adjust your tension. And that gives you 2 loops on your hook. And of course, when you yarn over, you end up with the starting loop and sort of a second loop, so that's equivalent. And then from here, it's just the rest of a regular double crochet. Anchor, pull through, finish off. So that was option 1. Here's option 2. Yarn over, anchor, then add a bead. Some people will say you are pulling the loop through the bead, and some people will say you are pushing the bead down onto the loop. They are equivalent maneuvers. Both descriptions are correct. And I get that loop up on my working hook, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, finish off. So that was option 2. And here is option 3. Yarn over, anchor, pull through, and now I add the bead. finish off. As you saw, that was not very efficient, all that swapping of hooks and fiddling. So let me show you a more efficient way of doing this. I'm backing my work out, and I will do this again. This time I am preloading the beads on the neck of a smaller hook. This is what I did in the previous video. So you need compatible hook and beads. For this technique, for all three options, the bead needs to start to the left of the loop. I think of it as forward, it's closer to the tip. And notice you may be using a hook that is very much not the size you would normally choose to use with this yarn. So it can take a little practice to do this, and you have to watch your tension. For option 1, yarn over to the left of the bead, in front of the bead. Draw it through. Anchor. Pull through. And finish off. So that was option 1. Option 2, now I work the yarn over to the right of the bead or behind it. Then anchor. Slide the bead into position, pull through, and finish off. So that was option 2. Option 3, I'll just sort of leave the bead here. Yarn over out in front of the bead, so similar to what you did for option 1. Anchor, pull through, now the bead comes into position, and finish off. And for some silly fun, let's see what happens when you put 2 beads on 1 stitch. In this case, the yarn over goes in between the beads. I'm using options 2 and 3. Anchor, bead into position, pull through, second bead into position, and finish off. So that was a little more efficient. Another way of working this technique, if you have loose beads, and especially if you're using different colors and improvising, because the bead needs to be out in front of the loop, out on the tip of the hook, you can just dip the hook into your beads and get a bead to pop up onto the hook. So that's another way to work this technique more efficiently. So let's see what we got. The pros and cons of this technique are very similar to the previous video. We don't have to pre-string beads, we don't have to plan ahead, you can improvise, you can change your mind, you can rip back, it's easy to fix mistakes, it's easier to work in multiple colors of bead. So if you like more creative freedom and improvisation, this is maybe a more helpful technique. You don't have to pull your yarn through hundreds of beads, so less likely to abrade and weaken your yarn. On the other hand, this is not my first choice for a portable project because you have loose containers of beads and that tends to end in trouble. So not as portable. looking at the orientation I got, I find it interesting. I get different orientations with the 3 different options. So option 1 gives me a very horizontal orientation. This is very similar to what I got in the first technique video, where I pre-strung the beads and then slid them into position in between stitches. The bead is sort of suspended between the posts, although in this case I have 2 strands of yarn instead of 1. I like that. And it is reversible. So that's rather nice. Option 2, the bead is very much vertical. And remember, some beads definitely have a direction. You probably wouldn't want this heart to be sideways or upside down. So this is nice and vertical. Whereas option 3, it's a little bit angled. And when I worked single crochet at the bottom of the swatch, I got essentially the same thing. So in both cases, those end up angled. Option 2, of course, the bead is a little lower on the post. Option 3, it's higher. In both cases, you have 2 strands of yarn holding the bead, so that feels more secure, but these are not really reversible. The single crochet isn't reversible either. Yes, I can push the beads through, but I don't know that they really want to stay on the other side. I don't think this is really reversible. So, not my choice for reversibility. On the other hand, if you were working a garment, this isn't too bad, and I think I like it better than technique 2, where the bead was sort of sitting up on the fabric with just 1 strand. Here it nestles in a little more, it's a little more secure, at least it feels that way, and the loopy business is on the back of the fabric. So between your skin and the bead, it's a little more protected. A loose yarn like this, maybe not the best choice, but a more tightly spun yarn, I think you would be fine on a garment. When you try to line up beads on the same stitch, they don't quite line up. That top bead is a little bit cocked compared to the bottom bead, so they don't quite line up. Not 100% happy with that. And then the last thing to mention is, because the beads are on the post of the stitch, they don't interfere with the chain. So on the next row you don't have to do anything special. The chain is there and you don't have to make adjustments. Just insert your hook where you would expect to. So there you go. That is what happens when you add loose beads in the middle of making a stitch. The next 2 videos are my original and somewhat unorthodox techniques for adding beads. See you at the next video. Happy crochet!